Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and I would like to welcome Miguel Connor, a good friend and a wild mystic. I really admire him, who is also a great podcaster. You can check his Eon by Gnostic Radio. And as I was doing research for a chapter in an academic book, Sacred Landscapes, I thought that I'm going to also include Miguel in this research. And it turned out that I really liked his answers. And I also thought that it would be nice to have a male perspective on Mary Magdalene and book encounter. So Miguel, if you don't mind, perhaps I'll briefly explain, why am I doing this also. So regarding a book encounter, so it actually has to do something with Miguel as well, because the term book encounter, which means a book that somehow changed your life or spiritual perspective or perspective on life, actually was coined, as far as I know, by Diana Pasulka, who now wrote a very famous book, American Cosmic. And it turns out that the first time I heard about Diana Pasulka was through Miguel's podcast. And it was so funny because it was only a year ago or so, and she was saying that, it's an academic book, nobody will read it. And now it's like the book on UFOs and so on. And she actually coins this term book encounter. So recently I was approached to write few chapters for few academic books, and I felt bad because, I was rejecting these opportunities for personal reasons and work reasons and other reasons. And then somehow connecting with Diana Pasulka also via social media, and we connected, it brought up certain sense in me that perhaps I could also write academically about things that actually matter to me. Do you know what I mean? Because very often I actually had to separate my academic research from, my spiritual research, except in few cases when I publish about spiritual travel and so on academically. And also it's interesting because she's a Catholic and we're both kind of former Catholics. And she also almost created this kind of longing in me in the last chapters of her book, American Cosmic, when she's at the Vatican Library. And I almost had a kind of like, if I stayed there at the Pontifical Institute, I would have access to these marvelous sources. But just for a second, right? Because I would lose all the freedom I have. Spiritual freedom, but somehow I felt like she's mirroring something. So that's why I decided this time I'll take this invitation to write this book chapter and actually use a term that she coined in her book, the book encounter. So Miguel, what would you like to tell us about yourself before we start about Mary Magdalene, about your spiritual beliefs and etc. So it will be easier for people to collect.
Well, I think you said it well. I am a podcaster, as I like to call myself, a garage philosopher, hedge theologian. And I've been very interested in the Gnostic point of view for many years. It fits me in my journey. Mm-hmm. Not for everybody. I usually tell people it's probably not a good idea you go down that road because it tends to be very edgy, very deconstructive, very existential.
Yes.
And it does challenge all of your norms about what it is to live in the world and what it takes to really transcend the suffering of the world. So that's basically it. I've written a few books on Gnosticism, fiction writer, but for most of my work, I would tell your audience to go to thegodabovegod.com or type in Aeon by Gnostic Radio, and you'll find out about all my shenanigans on the internet.
That's right. And I just want to say that Miguel is a true original. He has very deep insights, and he's not afraid to go in some directions that most people wouldn't dare. So that's why this is and extremely knowledgeable. So I really like this term garage philosopher, right? Because it really fits you very well. So now that we know a little bit more about you, would you tell us, what was your first, I'm just looking here at the questions that I sent you, your first Gnostic book? And we just explained perhaps that Gnostics were basically considered heretics, by mainstream Christianity, but basically these are the people who are like us, like actually all modern spiritual seekers, who emphasize their own personal spiritual experience and their own interpretation of scriptures over the ones that are basically created by institutional religions. So, and they believe that your own inner knowledge is the path. So so everybody's clear on this. Miguel, what was your first Gnostic book?
Well, yeah, and well said. I think you're talking about Diana Pasulka in her book, and of course, she is in the sort of same group as Jacques Vallée and Jeff Kripal. Experience is what matters, and we've gone through thousands of years where our personal experiences didn't matter, and now that seems to have shifted. Of course, reality has shifted. It's become very malleable in this year and in the recent, but it is a great time to explore your inner self and to explore altered states of consciousness and possibilities out there in life. As I said in your questions, my first one would have to be Alice in Wonderland. That may sound strange, but I think we do find the great Gnostic myth there. Although obviously some have said correctly that Alice in Wonderland is also Neoplatonic, it's Hermetic, but those three, probably you could even say Jewish Merkaba, because those traditions were about the fall of the soul into matter. And the Gnostics, of course, took from Plato, where the soul was feminine, and they tied it into Sophia, the great divine feminine figure who falls from the eternal realm and falls into matter and finds herself, like the Shekinah of the Old Testament, lost in a very strange, antagonistic, and illogical world, and sort of has to find her way out after going through various lessons and various tribulations, and with the help of other people in Wonderland, just like Alice. So at the time, being 5 years old, of course I didn't know it was Gnostic, but the story stayed with me. It's really an archetypal story. It's a mythical story. It's a universal story. And it's at the end of the day, it's a very Gnostic story.
Oh, thank you, because I actually completely didn't get it, probably because I was so young when I read it, you know, but yeah, I just thought it was a strange story. I read it, and I'm not sure, you know, what impressions I had after that. So it was also...
I mean, of course, I'd say I know Aleister Crowley used to hand it out in his classes to students so they could really understand the ancient mysteries what they're about. And of course, the great Gnostic gospel of our times, the Matrix, is heavily based on Alice in Wonderland. Morpheus is always making the analogy of the Matrix and Wonderland being one and the same.
Interesting. I'll have to probably reread it. Thank you. That's very interesting. So now let's move into what was your Mary Magdalene book encounter, which basically the book that somehow, you know, made you interested in Mary Magdalene, and then we go from there.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I also like to say, as you talk about book encounters, I've come to realize that more times than not, we don't choose books, books choose us. And sometimes they become part of us, part of our DNA. Sometimes they strike us really hard at once, and sometimes they slowly, again, assimilate into our spiritual DNA, and we can't shake them, and they change us forever. And the great thing about books is they truly are an interactive medium, unlike much more, because we have to engage our imagination, we have to engage our intelligence, we have to fill in so many blanks, and often these blanks are coming from deep within us, from our needs, from our trauma, from our unconscious. And I'm leaning towards fiction. And why am I saying that? Because many years ago, as I was evolving, you might say, leaving my Roman Catholic background, and also I was always sort of a New Ager Catholic. I was also leaving my New Age, moving away from Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and all those guys, as well as I was moving away from Rome. So at the time, it was during a time when Mary Magdalene was a hot commodity because of the Da Vinci Code, because of books like Holy Blood and Holy Grail, Templar Revelations. There was a whole bunch. She had a huge interest. She became hugely popular, and that also created a interest in Gnosticism too, and alternative Christianities from ancient times. So I was reading all these books, the books that I've mentioned. I was reading the Gnostic texts where she appears, Gospel of Mary, Pistis Sophia, Dialogue with the Savior, and it was it was okay. I mean, and Elaine Pagels, of course, talks a lot, writes about her in the Gnostic Gospels. Karen King, she was sort of a feminist icon to many scholars, but it just wasn't clicking. And of course, I knew at the time you have a lot of deprogramming. All of us, when we shift, we have years of deprogramming, and it never really stops. So going on Amazon looking for books, because I'm a voracious reader, but back then when I was doing freelancing, I could read 3 or 4 books a week. I came along this book. It's called I know it's backwards, but it's called The Secret Magdalene by Kai Longfellow. She also wrote a book on Hypatia of Alexandria, which is incredible.
Wow.
But this is a fiction book, first person through the eyes of Mary Magdalene. And it was incredible. I mean, again, I was talking about engaging my imagination, my unconscious, everything just sort of exploded and clicked, because once you're interacting, once you become the protagonist, then you truly understand what the protagonist is going through. And the book is extremely well researched. Kai spent 7 years researching just the customs, the geography, the conscious. I mean, it's not like a modern retelling, because you feel like you're back in those days, the way they talk, the way the society is structured. And it was an incredible journey from Mary Magdalene being a seeker to meeting Jesus, to the sort of tragic ending. And she brings in so many of the sources from Gnostic Gospels to the Passover plot to Holy Blood. She brings a whole bunch, and she admits she was creating a new myth that was still loyal to sort of this story of Jesus and Mary, which is, of course, in the Gnostic Gospels. On the higher plane is the story of Sophia and the cosmic Christ, but it was down here on earth, and it was excellent characters. I mean, when I would reading, there'd be scenes when Mary and Jesus would be on the shores of the Galilee beach looking at the ocean or the sea, and I felt like I was right there. You get from the atmosphere to the texture of reality to their interaction. It was really beautiful and really touching. And again, it seems like I've been on this journey with the secret Mary Magdalene ever since then. So I highly recommend for everyone to read The Secret Magdalene, because it's an incredible journey.
Fantastic. So I actually didn't read this book. So when I got your answers, I thought I definitely have to have a look at this, because, I'm on my own spiritual journey, and I kind of follow my own spiritual journey. And sometimes maybe I get too academic about it, as some people started to comment on my on my blog. And now I decided to explore more like the side of imagination of my journey, and go back to spiritual, because I started to become a bit dry in my journey, because I was trying very hard to academically justify certain things, but the soul doesn't move this way, right? So this is partially why I accepted this, this academic assignment, so to speak, to write this chapter, because then I think I maybe can divide, have one side which is academic and the other one that is completely soul-directed. But I understand how you talk about, book making a big impression, and also sometimes it takes time to truly understand the book, because for me it was the Gospel of Mary Magdalene by Jean-Yves Leloup. And I was actually... That's why I wrote Jerusalem Diary. And then when I read Jerusalem Diary, I recently, browsed through this, I realized that I actually didn't understand anything then at that time, because I hardly mentioned anything that is of any value here. So it took, many years to actually say, I really, because I knew I adored him, but somehow it didn't, all of his conditioning, as you said, it didn't really, I couldn't express it, I think a part of my mind was blocking what was actually truly important, right? So the books work through us. And as you said, the books choose us, we don't choose them, because I was not looking even for anything. It just somebody, gave me the book. And I thought, what's this? I was just like being a happy New Age Hindu, why do I need this? And it turned out to be a very essential book in my life.
Yeah, I think one of the annoying things is, you often hear, well, reading is not gnosis or reading is not enlightenment. And of course, that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
When you read a book, you're talking about American Cosmic, Alice, you can feel something stirring within you, something awakening at the right time. I mean, your consciousness can completely shift by the time you end of this book, and you find yourself like the books you've read going on a new spiritual journey. You're a different creature. So there is gnosis through reading, there is enlightenment, there is satori, there is even salvation through reading books. So, and especially in this culture where nobody's reading any damn books, it's a good time to start reading some books.
I absolutely agree. And also, although we are on our own spiritual journey, kind of soul journey, also we need triggers. You know, it's like this is the moment of awakening, a little bit like a Zen master with a stick, right? So the book can be the stick, like, you know, wake up out of your own nonsense, right? So this is what I think, in a way, book encounter is. And as Pasuka mentioned in her own book, American Cosmic, she says it is exactly what you said. It's like the book chooses you. So she writes about people that the book actually falls on them. You know, they walk through a bookstore and, you know, and it just drops on their head or like a brick, you know, or something like that. And this is definitely something like that. So I absolutely agree. And I'm a big fan of, you know, Gnosis is definitely in the books also, not only, you know, we just have to find something. There is kind of almost like a synchronicity between the inner and the outer, right? And the book is like the outer, but it actually appeals to something inner. Now I'm looking.
Yeah, no. Your situation. What do I always say? My tagline is on the podcast: write your own gospel, live your own myth. So you have, when you write or create a play or whatever it is, you have to make it your own. Or as you said, you'll end up with the Apocalypse of Peter. You'll end up a dry canal, just mechanic.
Yeah. That's right. And this is what sometimes we are going to talk about it in a moment, but this is what actually sometimes our mundane lives are forcing us into it, you know, our workplaces, you know, and our responsibilities. So this is the way of getting away from this. So I'm just looking here at our questions. Okay. So did you have any particular feelings during the reading of a book or after this? And here you talk a little bit about, you know, her relationship with Jesus and how Jesus was portrayed and how she was portrayed in this book. If you'd like to share this for us.
Sure. Again, it's a first person recounting of Mary Magdalene in this parallel dimension. Again, in myth, there's no right or wrong answers. I think what did Aristotle say? The poet is better at interpreting history than the historian because he deals with universals. And as we've seen today, history without that artistic view, that mythical view, is nobody's learning from it. So you have the first person, Mary Magdalene, and in this story, she is the daughter of Joseph of Arimathea, and she's in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And again, very much like the consciousness of those days. For example, there was one scene where she's just a young girl or a teenager, but Joseph of Arimathea is hosting some guests, and she's there with one of her friends, and they're talking. But because the rules say that you're not supposed to talk to women, whenever Mary's, and she's asking all these deep questions, Dad, what about this? What about the politics? What about the Romans? What about our business? They act like she doesn't exist because that was Jewish law. Women didn't exist. Of course, once the guests are gone and they're alone, then he's Big Daddy, I love you, Joseph of Arimathea, you know. So, and she's not judgmental. Again, this was the consciousness of those, but she wants more. She knows that she wants the answers to the biggest life question, and that her being, even if she's a wealthy woman, or she will be a wealthy woman, she wants more. And then that's her story growing up, and then she hears about this Jesus, and he is portrayed, and he's an incredible Jesus because he is very much what a mystic is. He is a person, again, this is a story that on a higher level, and Kai even admits it, it's Sophia and Christ, but on earth it's Jesus and Mary Magdalene. He's portrayed with red hair, because in ancient times, somebody with red hair was an actor. So he's a trickster, and he's very debonair. He's like a man's man. He's smooth talking, but because he has
I
got
love it. I
yeah,
love it.
he's got these powerful mystic abilities. He's always in a lot of pain. He has migraines. He has visions that screw him up, and he has to pass out for hours. And it's a perfect depiction of what a mystic would be, because he's got one foot in the material world and the other foot in the spiritual world. So he's just confused. But of course, the visions, the philosophies, the what he says, he's gathering a large group, and Mary Magdalene joins this group, and they become she helps him very much to understand things. But it's not like, again, a subordinate thing, because Jesus is already more advanced, being from Galilee and starting his movement and his personality. Mary is sort of she is more sulking. She likes to break things down and be very careful, and Jesus is sort of this wild guy, sometimes devil may care. But eventually she evolves where she is on equal level of him. She just evolved a little slower. And they both become very much the partners in the movement. And it's an incredible journey that, of course, I'm not going to say, well, we know how the story ends, and that kind of ends. But then it depicts what happens to Mary afterwards. And I must say that in all the books that I've read, this is the best, most beautiful and touching sex scene that I've ever read, and it's 2 sentences long. It's, I mean,
But
perfect.
this is what you said in your answers to my question, and now I'm so intrigued, because as you know,
I still think about this sex scene, those 2 lines. But again, you have to read the whole book.
yeah,
You have to experience it, and then suddenly that climax of these 2 figures. It's incredible. It's memorable. I'll never forget it. Everything seems to be, it's almost like everything goes after that. Nothing matters, because they are unified in the most loving and romantic way I could have thought. So good job, Kai. And she admitted to me when I interviewed her for this book that most of it was channeled. She's not a scholar. She did the 7 years of research, but she had to allow the characters to flow through her. She had no goals. It's going to be Gnostic. It's going to be Dan Brown sensational. It's going to be alternative Christian. It just happened.
Yeah, and I think this is how great writing always happens. And what was blocking me when I was still living in the literary world, it is because they immediately tell you, like, I was asking myself questions like, what would my literary friends think? Or what would my academic friends think? And that's why I was completely blocked and I couldn't do anything. And if you do anything of value, it is kind of, I agree with you. It is a combination of something being channeled, but you still have to do your research, because otherwise, it is...
You got to serve your audience. You got to take care of your audience.
And also, I read many interesting books when I started on this journey, but, they have serious issues with, following through, right? So then it kind of, a great idea and great channeling is being almost discredited by its own authors because, they overlooked something or they didn't double check something. So I think, like, I'm so completely intrigued because, I'm interested in spirituality and sexuality, and that somebody managed to express it in 2 sentences. Now I'm dying, to read.
You just have to. But yeah, your work is incredible. Your blog posts, the insights you bring, and how you tie in the East and West and sexuality, relationships, feminist issues. You have like this giant, might say, working area to really create some amazing things. So yeah,
I'm just walking dark, but following some downloads and up, and my own path. So this is really just my spiritual journey that I'm sharing, and lots of letting go of ego in my case, because
and in our interviews, when you've been on a show, you've always been very personal and transparent about your life. So I guess you don't want to do that in books.
No, I guess I will have. Yeah, I'm doing it now. So it's a process. It is a process, yes, because I had to let go of a lot of things. Joseph Campbell, what he said, something I'm paraphrasing. You have to let go of the life that you plan to live the life that is waiting for you. And I've been saying this to myself for at least the last 15 years, and only now again I actually understand, what it really means. So Miguel. So because you have such a deep knowledge, you know, on Gnosticism and also Mary Magdalene and Sophia, which is actually very interesting because lots of us independently reach the same conclusion, you know, about Mary Magdalene and Sophia. It's almost an intuitive, mythical lead, you know. So how does it somehow on a deeper level change your spiritual beliefs or maybe the attitudes towards divine feminine? And you know, just I'm looking for a man's perspective, because I'm really delighted that just as many men as many women follow my blog, you know, which is, I feel truly supported by men in this. So I just want to give credit, you know, that men actually men who are traveling spiritual journey, they understand that this divine feminine has to be uplifted, because it's, you know, it's not going to work for either men or women or us collectively if it's not. So just, you know, give me your thoughts, you know, whatever they are.
Well, I think whether you're a man or woman and you're a seeker, you know that one of the goals is balance. It's restoration. It's completion. It's not some feminists or patriarchy or all that other. These days I'm starting to think it's all nonsense, because I am all about the balance and the completion, the apocastasis, the restoration of things. So we can look at, we know that there's forces inside us, the anima and the animus, that need to come together. We know there is an ancient tradition of myth where the men and the female and the male were together in these ancient myths. I mean, for example, in Gnosticism, the more I studied, the more I realized that Gnosticism, it keeps getting older, because as many scholars are pointing out, we're looking at the times of Ashira and Anat. That's when Gnosticism was. And the Gnostics might have just been the guardians of this ancient secret, because these goddesses were slowly wiped out by the cult of Yahweh, by, you know, a civilization trying to be more proper. So the sort of wild chaos, ecstasy, shamanistic vibe of the Gnostics just wasn't going to work out. It's neither good or bad. It's just sometimes that's culture, society. But so just by seeing and studying and feeling it, I know there is a completion, and that is the Gnostic idea of the syzygy, the divine and female forces together, joining together for completion, so then there can be more understanding, and the journey up the spheres can be easier. So I think that's, from my perspective, is why I very interested in Sophia, very interested in Mary Magdalene and the goddess cultures of ancient times and so forth. I think it's very important for the collective psyche of humanity.
And I think healing also, you know, like that we heal collectively, right? Because if the divine feminine is in this and in this kind of repressed stage, it's also very often manifests either through like fury, which is, you know, very common nowadays, and I completely understand it, although I think we have to get over this, although I would probably be criticized in some, you know, places for this. And another one, because we have to heal. There's no, you know, anger is appropriate at the beginning, and then we have to heal. And another thing, and I think I just lost my plot here, and another thing is, yes, this balance is really important. And I also noticed that there are many kind of male spaces, male movement, you know, and at the beginning I was put off a little bit, you know, by this, and then I thought, why am I put off by this, you know, like men are also lost in this madness, you know, like what we are going through right now. And I'm not.
Yeah, both men and women need initiation. It's essential for men and women to gather, to initiate, to understand, to become adults, and then go out into the world and do the right thing.
And in a mature way, in an enlightened way, because very often our relationship, for example, when I was a young woman especially, I was kind of obsessed with the idea of seduction, because I thought it was sexy, it was erotic, you know. But it's also, and it's, you know, it's fun, but it also kind of creates right almost from the beginning, if unless it's done consciously, as a conscious play, as a play of consciousness, kind of a manipulation thing between masculine and the feminine, right? It is like a woman has to be this kind of play a particular game, you know, to get men's attention, and it's just completely dishonest, you know. So how can we create a relationship that is perfectly honest and doesn't lose this charge, which is spiritual and erotic at the same time, right? So it's very interesting. And yes, and like you are, I agree with, you know, Jungian animus and anima. We have to bring it to some kind of balance in our world. And how would you, so do you have some final words, about the Mary Magdalene movement? Because you said that, in your opinion, I asked you a question, why do you think it's so popular nowadays? You said you actually think that it's losing its popularity, right?
Yeah, I think there was a huge swelling in the late 90s and early
Mhm.
21st century. And I don't know if it was the new atheist movement, the sort of conservative vibe that we had after 9/11. But I think she's sort of fallen off. And this is what's so incredible to me. I mean, look at this. You have a period of 300 years from the first century to the third century
Yes.
where there's all these texts that are extolling and uplifting Mary Magdalene. And over, she is really is the Gospel of Philip. She is the
Mhm.
favorite of Jesus. She is the dialogue of the Savior. She's the one who understood the all. She is like really the first human to get what
Yes.
eternity is. She is, even if
Sophia.
yeah, if she didn't write the Gospel of Mary, she just giving her authorship of this very elegant, very articulate, very intricate, complicated, cosmic journey gospel over and over for 300 years. There are communities that are seeing her as an incredible spiritual leader, as a teacher, and really as the really standing on her own as a figure, as a leader of a community. Now, can you tell me in pagan, Jewish, or Christian, any woman that has had that clout for 300 years? I can't even think of anybody in our modern times that would have that. I mean, yes, in fact, you had Hypatia, you had others, but we're talking for an entire culture, the Christian and that culture, she was really at the top. And it's amazing that she still seems to be in feminist circles, in occult circles, esoteric circles. She still just doesn't get, people don't see the enormity of her impact and how amazing that this figure would be standing in a world back then that pretty much thought women were soulless animals. So
That's right.
she's
Yeah.
not getting
And,
her due.
and actually, I wanted to go back to what you said, that Gnosticism gets older and older as people do research, because even when I read Elaine Pagel's, which, one of the first introduction to Gnosticism for many people, and then I gave a lecture at Carl Jung Society, and I was sticking by what I learned from Pagel's, like that this is early Christians are actually the Gnostics and so on. And obviously now we know it's not true anymore, right? Like, as you said, it's just were probably, somewhere from Egypt, ancient Egypt, and the same, lots of people make the connection between Mary Magdalene and the ancient goddesses of the past, right? Who stand by themselves as well. And it's interesting to me that this movement that you said that was very strong of Mary Magdalene, which was also connected with woman with the alabaster, what is it, the woman with the alabaster jar? Yeah, is
Right,
it?
yeah.
So when we're talking about Mary Magdalene as the wife, I actually am not very excited by that, so
Mary Magdalene, the what? The wife?
the wife of Jesus,
Oh, okay,
like,
yeah.
I'm not actually excited by this, because it started the whole also interest in pilgrimages to France and so on.
Because
Because
that's not how the ancients are. That's a funny thing. That's a sort
yeah,
of later
that's right.
medieval romantic.
Yeah, exactly. It's extremely medieval, and actually she draws from this. But for me, Mary Magdalene is the carrier of ancient wisdom, of some kind of, we could call it Gnostic secret, but the secret of actually completely empowering us, some kind of a doorway between ignorance and true knowledge and true wisdom. And I think that this is still a place for us to explore. I personally would like to explore this, and I love, that you also do this, and interview people from, wide areas of interest and so on.
Yeah, and then I mean, when you and forgive me for interrupting, I'm excited, but Mary Magdalene is sort of just the entry drug into Gnosticism, because then you bring out Eve, Zoe, Noria, Sophia, the Trimorpar below. You bring up other figures that are, of course, semi-historic, like Salome and others. You bring up texts like the Acts of Philip, with Mary Magdalene dresses up like a man, is like the first Mulan of the West. And I mean, you enter this wonderful labyrinth of female figures who complement also all these wonderful male figures like Simon Magus and Helen.
Yes.
And it's an incredible journey. But again, maybe I'm crazy, but I think it's amazing how the occults, how feminists, how Wiccan and pagans that still don't seem to get what an incredible period and what the Gnostics really did 2,000 years ago, which hasn't been matched yet. Even today in occult and New Age circles, men are still at the top. I mean, just look.
Yeah, absolutely. But we are going to correct it, Miguel. We are going to correct it. And popular or not, I'm going to kind of drive through this Mary Magdalene as the, carrying a mystery rather than being somebody's partner and a wife. Although, it is an interesting concept and obviously it worked for many people. It doesn't work for me that well. And I think we have to really look at her as the carrier of wisdom, the Sophia, the carrier of wisdom, of the feminine face, so to speak, right? So would you like to add anything at the very end, or you think you're...
I think that's it. I'm trying to think.
You kind of had a very nice eruption there, of passion.
I could get, don't get me started. Well, I think the other interesting thing about the Secret Magdalene is Peter's portrayal, because it helped my exorcism, because Peter is portrayed, and it makes completely logical sense, as this gigantic mercenary, also redhead like Jesus, just crazy kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger on steroids, not on steroids, but on some sort of a
meta steroids.
But he is there to protect Jesus. That's his life, because even though Peter's angry in the book, and like in the Gnostic Gospels, her and Peter are butting heads a lot.
Mary Magdalene and Peter,
Mary Magdalene and Peter are butting heads. You realize in this book that Peter's just afraid. He's like most humans. This anger and this bravado, it's because he's afraid. He's afraid of the world. He's afraid of the Romans. He's afraid for his family. So it comes across as this anger, and Jesus is the only thing that really gives him hope, that tempers his anger. And he actually tries to work with Mary Magdalene when Jesus is like, nope, she's part of the team now. This is where we're going as a group. But understanding that how he was conquered by fear, like most humans are, even today in this era.
Yeah.
I had a lot of empathy, because I understand once the fear virus gets into you, once you are so hard at controlling things, but things slip through your fingers, you will go into a spiral of anger and confusion, which was Peter. And Joanna, that that saying in the Gospel of Mary, when Peter goes, if they didn't spare the Savior, what do you think they'll do to us? When Peter says that in the novel, I felt so bad, because it's like he realizes what a hard world this is. Yes. And he realizes that all his swords and strength and fighting Romans is not going to help him, and he's just lost but unlike Mary, he has not taken that journey of releasing himself from the fears and the desires, and really gone to the upper worlds to gain that energy. So I felt that it was a beautiful dichotomy. I saw as much of Peter and me as I saw Mary Magdalene, as I saw Jesus. And the book has other great characters. Jesus's twin, Judas Thomas, is a great character. James, they're all very good characters. But it's wonderful to be able to go back in time and really walk in their, not shoes, but their sandals, and see what they were up against and what they had to do, even if it's a semi-mythical book. And I want to throw this too. If you want another good one, our friend Lawrence Caruana wrote The Hidden Passion, and it's another brilliant fiction book that takes you to the time. But this is very Gnostic, because this one has the Christ is very personable, and it's got all the characters Mary, but you also get Yaldabaoth, you get the Archons, you get the Romans all together, and it's a lot closer to the Nag Hammadi library, but it also takes you into a great journey of trying to understand what was going on those times and the grand drama above in the heavens.
So this is really interesting. I just want to elaborate very quickly and bring it back to, talking about Peter and Mary, because in Gnostic Gospels, they're like the opposites, but they're also perhaps mirroring our souls. Because this is what our struggle is, right? And especially I now, in those strange, I say, times of high strangeness, experience it even stronger. This like a need for survival, but which in some ways puts us also into the position of being a keg in a machine. It feels sometimes like almost like selling my soul just to survive, right? To earn a living,
Exactly.
to do certain things. And this is a little bit like Peter, what's going to happen to me? Like a very important existential and, childlike question, what's going to happen to me in this human body? And then Mary Magdalene, who somehow managed to transcend it, you think? Like she and Jesus, obviously, right? He made this choice, right? Maybe he didn't have a choice. Maybe it was his path, right? But when she just goes this the way of the soul, and I don't know about. I certainly see like both you and I and many people are juggling this, and I would so love to just go this way of the soul. And I'm still I am Peter too a little bit, because and completely struggling every moment of my day. How can I be like Mary Magdalene, for example, this person that transcends it,
he's again, it's a fear is just wanting us to control things. We want to control life. Fear is not accepting death, that we're already dead. And Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So Peter wants control. He wants the Romans to do the things he wants to do. He wants the Jewish priesthood to do if he can put his life and have Jesus in the middle, he'll be. But that's, of course, that's a lie, because at the end, even at the end of this novel of the Gnostic, even Jesus is not going to save you. You have to take your own path. And Mary gets that, because without Jesus, she's, of course, heartbroken. Her soulmate's gone, but she continues on her journey of teaching in Alexandria and France, of teaching
so
these
she
mysteries.
does, right? Because this is my thing, I intuitively know that she went to Alexandria, and this is what I'm exploring. And only now that I voiced it, people tell me, oh, but other people wrote about it as well. So because this is for me truly Mary Magdalene, not only with Jesus, but what she actually did in Alexandria. I'm not so interested in this medieval story of France, although it is a big thing, right?
Yeah. Well, back then, if you were anybody, it's like you're going to end up in New York or Sydney. You had to go to Alexandria to make a splash.
Especially if it is something of spiritual or intellectual value in those days.
Yes.
Right?
That's where all the teachers, the libraries, that's where all the seekers and mystics were really congregating. So
thank you, Miguel, for this. And, it's really interesting, but, it's part of our journey. Did you find the way between, Peter and Magdalene in your own life, or you still juggling?
Every day it's the gospel, the entire gospel plays. Resurrection, Peter, Mary, Jesus. Every day it's and every day I hope I'm a little bit closer to my own wholeness, to integrating all these characters, because I don't ever want these characters to leave me, because they make me human. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Miguel.